Lecture 1, Certainty. There are 5 basic requirements that need to be satisfied in order to make a contract. An agreement between the parties, which is usually shown by the fact that one has made an offer and the other has accepted it. An intention to be legally bound by that agreement, often called intent to create legal relations. Certainty as to the terms of the agreement, capacity to enter into a contract, consideration provided by each of the parties. In previous sections, we covered offer and acceptance and consideration. In this section, we will cover intention, certainty, and completeness. Capacity is usually not tested in the exam. However, it will be touched upon during this course. After today's lecture, we will be done with the requirements of the formation of a contract. After this section, we can move on to the contents of a contract. This section first deals with cases where the parties have used ambiguous or unclear language, and then looks at cases where the parties have deliberately left terms to be agreed at a later date. In the former cases, the agreement is often described as vague, while in the latter cases, it is described as incomplete. But isn't it true that vagueness most of the times results in incompleteness? For example, if you and I create an agreement which really does not talk about pricing very clearly, then it is in reality an incomplete agreement. Why? Because it lacks a term specifying the price. Now remember that by contrast, an agreement can be incomplete without being vague if you and I agree to come to an agreement as to the pricing at a later date. Such a contract is clear on the face of it how the price should be determined by agreement of the parties. But as we will see later, the courts are reluctant to enforce such an agreement unless there is a mechanism included for completing the agreement in the event that the parties fail to agree on the price. Let's look at the vague agreements first. There are 2 things to keep in mind while discussing vague agreements in your exam. It is not the role of the court to create the terms of the contract. If this was to happen, it would be like imposing a contract upon the parties. If the terms are vague, which means they cannot be determined with certainty, then there is no contract for the courts to interpret. The contract never existed. Keeping these 2 things in mind, we will look at and compare 2 main cases, and we will try to find a reasoning as to why these 2 cases were decided differently. The cases are Scamwell versus Austin and Hillas and Company Limited versus Arcos Limited. In Scamwell and Nephew versus Austin 1941, the parties entered into an agreement whereby Scamwell were to supply a van for £286 on hire purchase terms over 2 years, and Austin was to trade in his old van for £100. There was then some disagreement and Scamwell refused to supply the van. It was held that there was no certainty as to the terms of the agreement. While there was agreement on the price, there was nothing in relation to hire purchase terms stating whether it would be weekly or monthly installments, or how much the installments would be. The agreement therefore was held to be uncertain, and the contract argued was held to be void. The problem in this case centered on the meaning of hire purchase terms. The House of Lords held that the agreement was uncertain, and therefore the contract argued was void, that it did not exist. Viscount Maham conceded that in some cases it was possible to imply terms that would explain what hire purchase terms meant, but it was impossible to do so in this case. He thought that the words had such a wide range of possible meanings that it was impossible to arrive at a single one. Now let's look at the second case, Hillas and Company Limited versus Arcos Limited 1932. Hillas agreed to buy 22,000 standard softwood goods for fair specification over the season 1930 under the following conditions. Clause 9 stated, buyers shall also have the option of entering into a contract with sellers for the purchase of 100,000 standards for delivery during 1931. Note that there was no mention of the kinds, sizes, or qualities of the softwood timber that was to be supplied. It was held that the agreement had been relied upon and the court was able to infer the intention of the parties based upon the terms in their agreement and the usage in the trade. It is useful to compare Scamwell versus Austin with this case, which is Hillas and Company Limited versus Arcos Limited, where an agreement to buy and sell timber contained 2 important terms. The first was that the buyer would buy 22,000 standards of fair specification. The second was that the buyer was granted an option to buy 100,000 standards. Buyer tries to exercise their option. They found out that seller did not have any timber to sell. Buyer sued for breach of option. There was a lot of debate centered on the meaning of 100,000 standards. It was a vague term, but it was debated whether courts could imply terms explaining what is meant by 100,000 standards. The House of Lords accepted that the agreement was complete and binding. Lord Tomlin thought that the option implicitly referred to 100,000 standards of fair specification, like the first term for the sale of 22,000 standards of fair specification, even though it did not expressly say so. He also thought that the meaning of fair specification was itself vague. Although it was again possible to imply a meaning to make it sufficiently certain on the basis that the parties must have attributed some meaning to fair specification because they had performed the first term relating to the sale and purchase of 22,000 standards of fair specification. In other words, by accepting the first batch of timber, the buyers must have accepted it was of fair specification and therefore attributed a meaning to fair specification. Lord Tomlin also looked at evidence of how the timber trade was conducted so that he could imply a specific meaning to the phrase fair specification. It may be that the agreement provides a mechanism to establish the term. In such a situation, there is certainty of terms. Thus, if interest on a loan is to be set at 1% above the Bank of England's base rate on a certain date, then this is a certain term. It cannot be stated at the outset of the contract what the interest rate is, but certainty of terms exists because on the relevant date, the interest rate can be determined by an agreed mechanism. There is a difference between a term which is meaningless and a term which has yet to be agreed. Where the term is meaningless, it can be ignored, leaving the contract as a whole enforceable. Let's now look at some recent cases where apparently vague terms were treated as sufficiently certain in the Court of Appeal. The cases involve low-cost flight industry. In Durham Tees Valley Airport versus BMI Baby 2010, a promise by the airline to establish a two-based aircraft operation for 10 years at the airport was held to be not void for uncertainty. In this case, the court found in favor of the airport that a promise by the airline to establish a two-based aircraft operation for 10 years at the airport was not void for uncertainty, even though this did not impose a liability to operate a specific number of flights. In Jet2.com versus Blackpool Airport 2012, the Court of Appeal found that a promise by the airport to use their best endeavors to promote Jet2.com's low-cost services and use all reasonable endeavors to provide a cost base that will facilitate Jet2.com's low-cost pricing was binding. This meant that after 4 years of allowing Jet2 to operate some flights outside normal operating hours, it was a breach of the best endeavor clause for the airport to suddenly say it was no longer allowed. An important thing to note is the fact that the term that had been given meaning to in a contract had actually been operating for 4 years already. This was an important consideration.